Welcome to the Thoughtful Software Podcast. Innovate and thrive with thoughtful software. Today, we are excited to welcome a special guest onto this episode of the show. Jim Thomas is a senior manager of product and brings over 15 years of experience in operations, project, and product management to the discussion. Jim's leadership drives strategy, transparency, and great customer experience delivering products that are simple, scalable, and sustainable. In this episode, we discuss overcoming the project management pitfalls that can hinder productivity and kill innovation, as well as what steps can be taken to ensure that every project delivers value. Here's Andrew, Fahad, and Jim.
So on this podcast, we often talk about project failure, but we don't often discuss reporting and tracking and managing projects. It's a key part of building thoughtful software. So today we have Jim Thomas from Freedom Financial who's going to help us discuss all of this and how to go from the 100,000 foot level to the 1 foot level and back. We're going to discuss the big picture and to the details, working with stakeholders and executives, and much, much more. We'll probably get into why status meetings need to die. I'd love that. Jim, it's great to have you on. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here today.
Good. It's excited to have you on. So let's get started. Most often, project management tools such as Asana and Jira help teams manage the day-to-day task, and they have some reporting capabilities, but I'll just say, it's okay. I don't know how many people use it. The challenge really is how to roll up relevant information of a project in a simple, understandable format for the team, management, and stakeholders, and it seems to be a very difficult problem. So Jim, from your experience, we'll start from the beginning. How have companies tried to solve this problem?
Yeah, it's such a great question, right? And I've been at a few different places where these problems are solved. I feel like almost all the same and yet all a little bit different. There's meetings, right? Everyone's familiar with a status meeting. And this could be something driven, I've seen from Excel spreadsheets through the Asana that's been referenced, and then a myriad of other sources, right? Even Word documents or text documents of bullet point lists of to do. I've seen status meetings and project presentation happen in one-on-ones, even one-on-ones with a stakeholder or kind of when I say one-on-one, a stakeholder with, the project team. I've seen them happen as simply an email, right? In some cases, you can't get on the schedule. I've seen it happen as an email, and then obviously we have the dreaded PowerPoint, and 40 slides later, a status update, and everyone's kind of scratching their head. So I think it's been a long time of doing meetings like this, and there's definitely opportunity to change.
So let's dive into that a little bit, because I know everyone listening, most of our listeners are CIOs and everything else. They've all seen these eyes glazed over looks on their team when they see these 40-page PowerPoints. Those are my favorite, by the way. They're like,
Sure.
we have a template. I'm like, your template's 40 pages. It doesn't make any sense. One of the core problems, though, is reporting comes in multiple flavors, right? So if I'm reporting to a CIO, they care about something different than my team or my my peers. For example, if you're working on a program made up of multiple projects and reporting. And so what really adds complexity to this in my mind is not just the singular reporting meeting that occurs, it's all the personas that get reported to, and then also the buy-in on the report. So like, I was an engineer for a long time, and it'd drive me nuts if I had a project manager who would just report stuff without running it by the team. And then when I was this line engineer just doing work, I had no power. But when I was a tech lead, I regularly have to be like, you have to walk that back. You have to go back to the VP and tell them that that's not true. Like, you mischaracterized the progress. And it becomes a mess. It's a tangled mess of multiple layers of buy-in from some people accepting that this is what's being reported, getting that information out of engineers, because we all know engineers are the best communicators on the planet, and all the way up to how do I get my peers and my stakeholders and my sponsors and everyone reported right. It's a real challenge, right?
Yes. Yes, and you touch on some good points, right? Like getting the data of an accurate report out of an engineer sometimes can be challenging, right? A great project manager, though, they're gonna be able to work with that engineer as well as work with the stakeholder. And realistically, the data that comes out of the engineer needs to be, consolidated to what I would say is, what is the deliverable? What is the status of it? Health or otherwise? Does it need escalation or a decision if that status is not in a green or an acceptable state? And if so, that's the information that we like to bring to our leadership team. And then, otherwise that status report, you're including data there that doesn't necessarily need a meeting, right? So you'd be better off almost sending the report if no decision and no risk escalation needs to happen. You might be able to do that in a, you know, in a in an app, in a dashboard, in a one pager.
So diving into, not really diving in, I guess, moving that thought process along, I think that that's interesting, getting that information. But, a lot of these systems, I think, naively are built in the sense that executives are going to log into them. And bless their heart,
No.
but they're not going to. And
Right.
so they built these dashboarding features. And, one of the interesting parts that I see is executives need to be able to look at something for 5 seconds and know whether they have to do
Yeah.
something.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the tools that we use and that I like to use is Jira, right? We mentioned it earlier. This is a very common tool. It's a great tool for managing engineering deliverables, right? You're managing engineering work. This is a phenomenal tool. As you start to, you know, tread water into business projects or business initiatives or even, internal operational work, it does need some tweaking, right? So you need to modify. And if you're not all on the same page, when an executive sees that report, they might look at those engineering deliverables that are wrapped up very nicely in stories and tasks that roll up into epics. And then you talk about those epics in a sequential fashion, usually, right? Hey, this is the most important from a business value perspective this week or this period, and then we move on to the next one. But if an executive wants to look at those, and if that executive wants to look at those on their own time, yeah, you need to log into that tool, or you need to have had some type of intermediary provide you the data that lives in that tool, because some of them are not always they're not always super easy to navigate. So yeah, getting that data out sometimes is one of the hardest parts.
Yep. We actually, it was not just development either. This is a common problem in every field. When you talk about like Salesforce and getting territory reports and things like that, I know Fahad can attest that Salesforce is always clean, beautiful, up to date, because salespeople love to log in and update their opportunities. But in real world, that I didn't just make up, it's just the same problem. People don't like to log into system of records, keep them up to date.
Right.
And then on top of keeping up to date, 9 out of 10 times it makes sense if you're working, in the trenches. But if you're not, and all you care about is one number, how's my East Territory doing or my West Territory doing?
Correct.
You end up with, how do I even get that information? Like in Jira, all the systems of records, Workday, Jira, the Salesforce, pick your favorite system of record. They're always customized to the nth degree, because no one business does everything the same way as everyone else. That's why these systems are customizable. Go ahead, Fahad.
Yeah, so the question that I have there is that if these systems of records are not continuously updated, why are we still reporting from them? Why are we exporting this data and trying to manipulate it and report to executives? I think everybody generally understands this is maybe not the most accurate information, or it's outdated, yet we still
Sure.
have weekly status meetings. Why do we keep doing that?
Well, that's because we need the 40-page PowerPoint template. That's what we use that for. That's where that comes into play.
That makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
It's actually interesting. It's why the meeting occurs, because in my mind, it's a forcing function inside of organizations. I know that 3 o'clock, the status is going to be updated for my project. And so if I don't update the system by noon on Tuesday, some arbitrary date, then my status isn't going to be reflected properly. And so these meetings and these we'll call them checkpoints, occur, and they're a forcing function to get people to update. No one wants to go into their one-on-one with their manager if you're a salesperson and have opportunities that are up to date. And so they update their opportunities, and the one-on-ones is a really common pattern for that reason there. And so, it sucks because it's 45 minutes and 40 slides later kind of mindset. But I think there's a huge opportunity here in terms of changing the paradigm and changing the behaviors of organizations and saving everyone, quite frankly, thousands of hours across most medium-sized organizations on changing this particular behavior.
What I think would be a great start to that is, and it honestly, it doesn't even matter what the system of record is, right? It really doesn't. Like, it could be post-it notes. I mean, it could be a notepad. It doesn't matter. As long as you're taking your deliverables, speaking to them in such a way that your leadership team understands them and can tie them back to their objectives, right? Like, what is my outcome? What am I getting from this deliverable? If you're able to narrate that, then maybe the system of record is just helping you execute the work. I think that's why a lot of folks maybe today are still using presentations, because they're abstracting that engineering layer into the presentation to narrate against that deliverable. By shifting your mindset a little bit and saying, hey, look, when we take an overview of our system of record, these are the components that need to be modified so that whether you're an engineer speaking to the deliverable or an executive reading the deliverable and understanding what outcome that ties to, you're all speaking at the exact same level. And I think that that's where kind of changing the mindset of the status meeting comes into play. Start from a common ground of information, eliminate the need of urgent updates a few minutes before a status meeting. Get that deck out hours before it's due, or even have it set up in such a way that it's real time, right? Those are the types of mindsets that will change how status meetings are running and how they operate.
Well, what about an alternative? So I like what you're saying. One of the things I've done in the past, as I've run business teams and sales teams, is that we're not going to go through the sales CRM at all. I hate going line by line and trying to see what's going on. It's like really talk about the main issues. What are the big challenges? Because a lot of these software projects, they're very complex, and to boil it down to say, green, yellow and red, and let me just go walk you through a status update. I don't know if it really fully captures the complexity of, really achieving these initiatives.
No, I think you're right. It definitely does not capture the complexity, and that's why when describing those deliverables and tying them back to outcomes, because when we leverage our executive staff, we want to make sure that they're understanding where this particular initiative is at any given time, that they're understanding, what the staff needs from them. Like, do we need a decision? Do we need an escalation? Do we need a roadblock removed? Those types of things. If that information can be conveyed in real time, in a fashion that is not going into a system and clicking through, like maybe if we could get that summarized, it doesn't even need to be in a deck. It could be in a text message, frankly, right? There's a lot of different ways I think that you could communicate it, but the key in a lot of the meetings that I go into is I want to make sure that when we have executive staff there, that they understand what their responsibility is, that it's not just being spoken to about a status and then them asking questions. Like, we want to make sure, hey, you've received this report, you've received your update. The next, the next thing is, that next 30 seconds is we either need to assess a risk or make a decision or go from there. And if they still want to continue to have those status meetings, great. If not, though, that stuff can perhaps be communicated in another way.
Yeah, I'd just like to take a personal mission to just kill status meetings forever.
Yeah, I think what would be great is if you could if you could take a look at your status meetings today, right? Like any of the PMs or any of the product folk that are running a status meeting, and if you're going through those status meetings and referencing content that's on a slide or in a presentation or in a chart somewhere, um, without requiring a decision or an escalation, um, and it's really just a discussion. That's great if that's the intention of the meeting, right? But it if if you're doing that every week or every couple of weeks, that may not be the right cadence. I mean, you may need to pull that back to less frequent, and then you may need to report on those status meetings and not even this project status, right, or initiative status. Report on that in a different way, right? Send out a summary, ask if there's questions. Again, text, chat tools, whatever it may be.
It's really interesting because we moved to this agile world where these are multidisciplinary teams. There are so many different roles on a team. There's product owners, product managers, project managers, engineers, support people. It can be really, these teams can be pretty massive, and yet they all rely on a singular stakeholder, usually an executive or some sort of decision maker who the escalations go to. I find it weird that every day these teams have stand up and they work together and they chat every day and remove blockers. And it's a really excellent practice that people pick up. But the process never includes the executives. And how do we include them every day into it? When we think about like cool automations in the future, how do
Yeah.
oftentimes escalations happen too late, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to
Oh yeah.
escalate because it's Friday. We'll wait till Tuesday. And instead of it being just a small little, field fire, it's now an entire forest fire. And now that person's like, oh, I got dragged into this again. And it's like, if something had alerted them, earlier, they could have just put it out, with a bucket of water instead of needing, the entire rescue operation for the project.
Yeah, and those are the types of automations, right? Like those are things I'm very interested in because like even from my perspective, the ability to liaise across various technical teams and various business teams is how we accomplish that's how you accomplish work, right? And the quicker that the team is able to bring forth an escalation, something that either myself or my team or my peers are able to step into and assist with, the faster we're able to determine whether leadership is required or not. And I think that it kind of starts with the communication at the team level that this is how we're going to handle these and just establishing it at the onset of the initiative, saying, hey, look, you know, this is something that's got a lot of eyes on it or it's got great business value. Um, there's no sense to delay, right? There's really no reason to delay an escalation. There really isn't. So the faster we can get that up through the chain, and maybe you run it through a product person, maybe it runs through a project manager, right? Depending on how your organization is structured, to just validate that escalation and then push that forward. There's probably a lot of methods that you could do that.
Hmm. So let's talk a little bit then. This is all current stuff, right? And some of these things that are happening and some of these pain points are because we live in a decentralized world. Organizations in general have gone completely decentralized. In Nico's case, some are even shrinking and flattening in order to keep up with more digitally mature companies and fend off the barbarians at the gate. Your Amazons and your these companies that are truly digitally mature and they're digitally native too. And so you have
Sure.
these flattening organizations, and historically PMO has been centralized. Data comes in, reporting comes out,
Yeah.
and that doesn't work in a decentralized world. You can have a centralized reporting thing that's siphoning all the data up that it doesn't quite understand because it's not in the trenches like it used to be.
Right.
How do you structure a team? Because reporting is critical in organizations. How do you move and adapt the PMO into something? For the listeners who don't know what PMO stands for, that's Project Management Office or Office of Project Management. Well, who owns this whole project management thing? What does it look like? 5 years from now, 10 years from now, how does it evolve into the future?
I look back, and even though the first org that I worked at, it didn't have PMO as a label over the way we operated, but that's effectively what it was. Myself, a couple of my teammates, and then a senior peer to me who worked in one of the other offices. What we would do is we would roll all of our statuses up to a single manager, and that single manager would report to leadership on the delivery, right? And at the time, I mean, we're talking this is probably 10 years ago. So at the time, that seemed to make sense. Hey, this one office controls this, information flows in, information is categorized and collated and then rolled up. The challenge with that, or the few challenges of that, and I'll just pick a couple that come to top of mind. It's slow, number one, and the information usually by the time that report comes out is stale. So not only is the data stale, but getting the report is a process in and of itself. As we look into the future, I think as you evaluate in your organization how you want to deliver, the PMO, while it offers kind of great, what I would say, ideas, right? Great frameworks and great structure. Running it from a central office may not make the most sense, especially as you have product verticals that more and more are really running they run a very tight ship. So if you get, product A, product B, each of those products have their own initiatives within their environment. Each of those initiatives have their own set of deliverables that are looking to achieve outcomes, right? So I think that what we're going to see is more and more of that. And as the product organizations within these companies get more and more mature, what you'll see is standard processes coming into play, and then those will roll up into a hub, a central interface. But it's going to be automated. Like, the difference is you remove that reporter at the top, and now it becomes, hey, project team in product B is working on X, Y, and Z, has got these dependencies, and product team A, uh, and then here's the summary. And oh, by the way, it's in real time. And oh, by the way, it's you know, it's on every mobile device. It's on every person's browser. It's on your right. It's on your email if you want it. It's on your Slack if you want it. Those types of things. I think that that's what we're going to see, a much more assistant driven, AI driven, and supported reporting mechanism.
So I'm going to ask the controversial question because I'm good at that. What happens to all the project managers? Like, do they turn into engineers? Like, what are they going to do if there's no centralized reporting? What do you think is going to happen to that?
That's a really tough question and a great question. I think you still need project managers to an extent. These are going to be folks that still liaise across the business units, right? Focus on gathering requirements, focusing on helping build out timelines, focusing on continuing to manage risk. And I think risk mitigation ends up being much, much more prevalent as real-time data becomes available, because your time to decision now is less. So you have a lot less time to handle and remove that risk from the environment if all of the data is real time. So I think the project manager role exists, but it exists in such a way that you're you're really becoming, the facilitator, the negotiator, across your kind of that sphere of influence, or the project's sphere of influence.
For the record, I agree. It was a leading question. I look at vertical slices as like product A, product B, product C, and everything that goes along with that vertical to allow it to ship. We'll call it slices. And in those whole slice of organizations, there's multiple functions. There's accounting, there's product owners, engineers, support, everything there. But there's horizontal roles within organizations that have to work across these verticals, because there's no such thing as true silos within organizations. Like, people try to silo, but silos are a leaky abstraction in the sense that, like, you all work for the same company. They're going to talk in the cafeteria. People are going to, you want that cross-pollination. And so you need different roles that work across all of these slices. And I think project management becomes a dynamic role that works across, multiple of these verticals to help them come together and build synergy across the organization. I think architects are another one of those, helping people build common platforms and core components and everything else. And there's 3 other job titles we won't get into, but I think it's a new type of horizontal role, and they work across multiple product divisions.
Well, and I think that that's something, the companies really need to explore. I mean, myself, I'm not an architect, but I get involved in a lot of those discussions, and what you find is when you are liaising across teams, certain if certain project managers, if not technical, could benefit from having an architect in you know in their group. So I could easily see a product organization structuring themselves in such a way where there's a product owner. You may have an engineering team that you're leveraging to deliver on those products. You could very easily have then a supporting project manager, probably a technical project manager, as well as an architect. Um, and that makes it keeps your organization small for that particular product vertical, and it gives you a resource to be able to liaise across teams, across business units, as those company dependencies come into play.
We've also, I think one thing I want to touch on too is that there's this evolution and of companies thinking about or just developing more of a product mindset versus a project mindset. How do you think that changes what's reported and how we interact with each other? Maybe it's like maybe meaning executives get more involved, but what comes to mind when we talk about product mindset for you?
For me, what I like to see when we think about a product mindset is either an individual or a group of individuals, you know, very laser focused on a set of outcomes. And if it's software, and maybe we just pick on a task management tool, right? You're gonna need to make sure that you're spending a lot of time understanding the needs of the customer and relating those needs into deliverables that match business value. The product org, if you want to deliver fast, I think a lot of it comes down to focusing, very, very consciously on what is going to provide the great business value, um, and then seeking to deliver that, whether that's with your engineering team, with a contractor, whatever that may be. You know, Compared to having a project manager oversee a project that seeks to achieve the same thing, they're not nearly as invested. At least that's my experience, right? So while yes, you could have a project manager run that very same initiative, I don't think it'll get as much TLC perhaps as having the product owner oversee it. I think the project manager needs to come in and support the delivery, but that the real drive and the real focus and the energy and the excitement of delivering that project, that really comes from product.
One of the things that's interesting, I think, is really underserved in organizations. I think about quite a bit, especially in the larger enterprises, advocacy, right? As tech stacks become more reusable, if you will. A lot of things are API driven. You got microservices being adopted in the enterprise. You have all of this stuff becoming available. If you look at like Twilio, a great company, they have a lot of dev advocates, Microsoft too for their cloud, Google, because you want to make devs aware of what they're doing and how to do and use your
Sure.
product. I feel like there's a need inside of organizations today with all these reusable components, to go in and kind of advocate for the stuff that other teams are building to say, hey, no, you don't have to build authentication. We have shared authentication here. Some people have mandates in place, but I feel like that doesn't build the best stuff, right? Mandating ideas is never a really good idea if you want creative, if you want the best. You will never be the best by mandation, because if it's mandated, I don't have to be good. I just have to be good enough that I can get myself mandated. And so it stifles innovation. I think, how project managers typically, know which projects, they understand portfolios and everything. Do you think project managers are going to play a key role in that advocacy going forward as people do become more, distributed, and you want an idea meritocracy where the best ideas are winning, and the best ideas are software systems as well. The best authentication system is there. The best, whatever is being used. Do you see that being part of the role, or do you think that will be its own role, just carved out? And people will have internal dev advocates at companies.
That's a really, I have not thought about it in that fashion. I could see an internal dev advocate being a role, because as a you know having project management experience in the past, just because I see a feature, right, or a software capability in some area of the organization, I don't necessarily know if it's technically feasible to deploy it on the thing that I'm working on. But if I had a liaison that I could ping ideas off of, I think it'd be really, really valuable. And that person would probably float amongst various teams. So I think it'd be very valuable to have a resource to be able to ask some of those questions to, and say, hey, look, what do you see out there, either in our own environment, or what's out there in the space that could maybe solve this problem for us? And can you get us some experience on this, or can you get us a white paper? Can you get us a demo, right? Depending on where it is, right? I think that could be a very interesting role.
I think it has to be at some point. I don't know who owns that. But when I think about some of the larger people we've worked with in the past, someone will have adopted AWS, and then someone else will be running a homegrown cloud, and they're burning probably not billions, but maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars in the backyard, when they all could have just adopted the similar approach. But there's no one going around saying, hey, look how much money we're saving doing XYZ. We built all the primitives, we built everything up for you. All you have to do is adopt it. It turns into, how do we work together to solve a problem, rather than, it's not my concern. And then not my concern mindset doesn't build. Software is a team sport. Unfortunately, it's also a league sport too at some companies. And so, but the best NFL teams don't look at the other teams and say, I'm not going to learn anything from them, and shove their head in the ground. No, they're the Browns are watching the other 31 teams, and the Patriots are watching the other 31 teams. It's like, how are they drafting? How are they making their choices? How are they playing? Well, what worked? What didn't work? And they're quickly picking up on ideas so they can make their own teams better. And they think that you need that liquid network of ideas to really be the best organization you can be. And I do think project managers have that insight and can play that role. Like, hey, you don't have to work on that, someone else is working on that over here. You can leverage that in this API economy and everything. I think there's something there. I think it's going to be a huge part of the next 5 years, certainly.
I would love to see that type of approach from a PM, right? Even as we work with organizations and ask, qualifying questions, is this best practice? What are other organizations doing to accomplish the same goal? I think that'd be a great, great kind of value add that a PM could bring, that really changes the discussion from, hey, are you keeping our tasks on track, to someone who's really providing, that consultative approach and being very much forward thinking when it comes to the overall, again, what is the customer getting as a value out of this, right? Like that would be a great skill for a PM to bring to the table and to be able to share either with their internal team or their clients.
Yeah. And I think there's a cultural aspect to it too, is that, you know, a lot of times people think it's a zero sum game. That, if their project gets funded, my project doesn't get funded. And I find that if, as a culture, and I guess I'm concerned with this because I'm a CEO, like I want my culture to be like, no, it's not a zero sum game. If it's important, we'll do it. We'll go get the money to do it because it's important, right? Now it all comes down to, is it important? Let's have that question. Like, I don't want to just greenlight projects because it makes you feel good. I don't care about that, although I hope you do feel good. But I do care about it being important. And if it is important, there's a lot of money in the world right now, right? Like a lot. And more is being printed every day. And so it's not a zero sum game in the set that you might have a budget, but maybe we go and we sell some stock, or we raise on bonds, or we do something and change the mindset of the zero sum game and say, no. What's important is we achieve our mission. And by achieving our mission, if this project helps us do that and it helps us towards one of our outcomes, let's go get the money. I think if you do that, then people start collaborating more. And they start thinking about, okay, how can I make your project more successful? Because it's important to all of us that all the projects that we do succeed.
Yeah. And I say this all the time, is we are on one big ship, right? This is, depending, some ships are larger than others, right? But I just say, like, we're on one big ship, right? And my objective is to help drive efficiency, to help drive a great experience, right? To help drive clarity, transparency for the stuff that I work on, right? And I think that that very selfless approach to delivery is maybe a perspective to take, because like you said, if a single effort by this one team that has a great technology or a great skill set can help lift the tide, then it lifts the tide for everyone.
Yep. Can't say it better myself.
As a final thought, how critical is this to do this now? Like, how urgent? We're talking about the evolution of the project manager and product manager. Is this something enterprises should be, actively looking into?
I think it's already happening to an extent, right? I think to an extent you're seeing that transition. Um, I follow stuff on social media and just reading about things in the space. It's like, yeah, there's product focus here, and then we've got PM delivery, and I'm seeing that merger in pockets. I would I would probably look at it from the perspective of, is this the right time for your organization to take those steps, and can we get the buy-in, right? Because it's a change, right? And now it comes down to everyone's favorite, change management. And as you shift a little bit of that mindset to, hey, we're going to have some more technical PMs come in to help deliver and execute and hold people accountable to timelines, right? We're going to use architects to make sure that we've got, great understanding of how, some of these tools work and what our overall environment looks like, right? Maybe we had this dev liaison role come in and be able to share knowledge across teams, across other companies in this space. I think as you start to head toward that direction, um, the change component is critical. Managing how you deliver it and communicate it, so that you don't fall into the pit of politics.
I'll add that I think it's actually urgent that people start doing it, because I believe everyone has to begin this march towards digital maturity. The numbers are there. Not doing it's actually irresponsible. I think it's McKinsey reported it was like 3% growth for non-digitally mature companies versus 10 to 15% growth. Like, we're talking order of magnitude difference in growth, which isn't big over a year, but over 10 years, you're dead. Your competitor is going to be double
Yeah.
your size, and they're going to buy you, and they're going to gut you, and then they're not going to have a competitor for very much longer. And so it's important that we move towards that. And I don't think in the new digital world, the traditional PMO and this traditional project management and the way things are done works. If things move too fast, you need to get people involved. You get them early and often. And I think that automation we talked about earlier and that move more towards that decentralized working across those verticals, making sure things are done, appropriately towards the shared outcomes and everything else. I think you have to move there, and you have to do it quicker and sooner rather than later, because your competition's doing it whether you want to or not.
Yeah, I mean that's and that is something that unless you're out talking to other PMs, you can only, I've chatted with some folks on social media, and that's how you learn, right? I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly trying to understand, what are other organizations doing in this space? We're in the fintech space, so I go on LinkedIn and go on Reddit and understand, like, hey, here's a question. Here's what we're trying to solve a problem for. How's your organization doing it? And a lot of places, in fact, I posted a question the other day, and the response was, hey Jim, great question. I've been doing program management for about 15 years. I think what you'll find in most organizations is folks are still rolling that up into an Excel spreadsheet just because everyone knows how to use Excel. And I said, well, that's great, because that is exactly what we did 5 years ago and 10 years ago, but it doesn't make us work any faster, and it doesn't put us a leg up on the competition, right? That's just status quo.
I love it. I think you get the last word, Jim.
I think so.
Hey, Jim, that's awesome. Thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Fahad, Andrew, thanks for having me. Really appreciate the time. Appreciate the discussion.
Thanks for listening. You can always connect with us at skiplist.com.